Flames claw at the night sky above a Han fortress, painting the clouds a sickening orange. The air itself feels thick, heavy with the taste of smoke and the distant screams of men. Arrows like angry hornets hiss from the darkness, thudding into wooden ramparts and flesh. Outside the crumbling walls, horsemen ride like ghosts out of the smoke, their faces grim masks lit by the burning buildings they've set ablaze. These are the Qiang rebels, warriors born to this harsh land, and they are taking back what they believe is theirs with fire and steel. Further out, a supply convoy, the lifeblood desperately needed by the Han soldiers inside the fort, burns like a funeral pyre. Grain sacks split open, spill their contents into the mud. Wagons collapse into charcoal skeletons. Supplies meant to sustain life, now just fuel for the flames. Somewhere in that mud, trampled under panicked hooves, the proud banner of the Han Empire lies smoldering, its embroidered dragon obscured by filth and defeat. Watching this nightmare unfold is a Han officer. His name is Zhuo. His face is hard, caked with dirt and sweat. Younger than the bloated tyrant he will become, but the coldness, the calculation is already there, deep in his eyes. He sits heavy on his horse, a solid, imposing figure against the flickering chaos, watching the fortress die, watching his men die. He listens to the sounds of slaughter, his expression unreadable. He knows the promises of reinforcements whispered by messengers from the faraway capital are just empty words, political games played by men who wouldn't last a day out here. No one is coming. No gleaming legions will march over the horizon to save them. Out here, on the bleeding edge of the empire, you are utterly, terrifyingly on your own. The mighty Han Empire once seemed eternal, stretching its power like a vast, silken tapestry from the eastern sea to the western deserts. For 400 years it had stood, a beacon of civilization. But here, on its raw, neglected frontier, that tapestry is fraying, unraveling thread by painful thread. The Han Empire fights for survival, not against a grand foreign invasion, but against flames ignited within its own borders, fueled by its own mistakes. This grinding, endless war, later known as the Liang Province Rebellion, wasn't just a footnote in history. It was a cancer, slowly eating away at the empire's strength, exposing its weakness, its corruption, its hollow core. And in the heart of that fire, in the crucible of that violence, something new and dangerous was being forged. A man who learned his lessons in blood and betrayal. A man who saw the empire's weakness and smelled opportunity. To understand how the Han Dynasty truly began to die, we must go to where its frontier began to burn.
Picture the Han Empire in its final century. Look past the gleaming towers of Luoyang, the capital city. Look past the silk robes and the courtly music. Behind the perfumed facade, something is deeply wrong. In the capital, life for the powerful is a dream of endless feasts, intricate gardens, and whispered plots. The emperor, Emperor Ling, sits on the dragon throne, but he is a puppet tangled in his own pleasures. He cares more for his vast collection of women and the extravagant building projects that bankrupt the treasury than for the reports of famine and unrest trickling in from the provinces. He is a man adrift, a weak ruler in a time that demands strength. The real power? It belongs to the shadows, to the eunuchs, men ritually castrated to serve in the inner palace, guarding the emperor's private life. But these men, led by the infamous 10 attendants, have become the secret masters of the state. Because they control who sees the emperor, what news he hears, they control the flow of power itself. They have turned the government into their personal piggy bank. Positions of power, governor, general, magistrate, are sold like trinkets in the market to the highest bidder. Skill, honesty, duty, these things mean nothing. Only silver matters. And a man who buys his power intends to get his money back with interest, usually stolen from the people he governs. These eunuchs also ruthlessly crushed any opposition through the partisan prohibitions, purges where hundreds of upright Confucian scholar officials were executed or exiled. The government was systematically stripped of its conscience, leaving only the greedy and the compliant in charge. While the court plays its deadly games of influence and wealth extraction, hundreds of miles away, the western frontier is a different universe entirely. Liang Province, Bing Province. These aren't places of comfort or sophistication. They are rugged lands of harsh mountains, scraping the sky, and wind-swept plains where dust devils dance. These border zones guard the empire's flank and control the perilous routes of the Silk Road, a potential river of gold. But holding this land cost blood and treasure, resources the decaying empire can increasingly ill afford. The Han government's approach to this vital region was a masterclass in mismanagement. They sent armies, built imposing forts, and pushed Han Chinese farmers to settle the land through the Tuntian system, agricultural colonies designed to feed the troops. But this pushed out the Qiang Tribes, who had grazed their herds there for centuries, treating ancestral lands as empty territory ripe for exploitation. The settlers themselves were often poor folk, lured by promises of land, or convicts exiled from the heartland. They lived hard lives under a harsh sun, farming with one hand on the plow and the other on a spear, always watching the horizon for danger. The soldiers in the garrisons were often forgotten men, their pay late, their equipment substandard. Their commanders were frequently corrupt officials sent from Luoyang, political appointees who knew more about court flattery than desert warfare, seeing their posting as a chance to get rich by stealing supplies or extorting the locals, both Han settlers and Qiang tribes alike. Imagine being a Qiang herdsman, watching helplessly as soldiers build a fort on the mountain your ancestors considered sacred. Imagine Han settlers plowing the grazing grounds your flocks need. Imagine Han officials demanding taxes you don't have, trying to force you to give up your traditions, your language, calling you a savage. Imagine treaties made by your father's generation being ignored, promises broken easily. How long before bitterness turns to rage? How long before you listen to the war leaders who say resistance is the only path? This wasn't just neglect. It was slow, grinding oppression, punctuated by shocking brutality. Han governors sometimes ordered massacres to teach a lesson. They kidnapped Qiang leaders during peace talks. They stole land and resources. The frontier wasn't just a line on a map. It was an open wound, festering with resentment from Han settlers feeling abandoned and preyed upon, and from Qiang tribes feeling besieged and dispossessed. It was a powder keg, leaking fumes of anger and desperation, waiting for the spark. The histories say the West was in flames, and the court sent orders that arrived only after the cities had fallen. The rot wasn't coming from the outside. It was spreading from the heart.
Who were these Qiang people, dismissed by the Han court as mere barbarians? They were not a single nation, but a collection of tough, independent tribes bound by shared language roots, part of the Tibeto-Burman family, and a way of life perfectly adapted to the harsh highlands and plains of the northwest. For centuries, they thrived here, primarily as pastoralists, herding sheep and yaks, their lives governed by the seasons, the search for good grazing, and the ancient spirits of the land. Their culture valued kinship, clan loyalty, honor, and survival. They were people of resilience, independence, and deep connection to the land the Han now claimed. And they were renowned warriors. Life on the frontier demanded it. Every man grew up learning to ride almost before he could walk, to shoot a bow with deadly accuracy from horseback, to wield a spear or sword. Their fighting style wasn't the disciplined, formation-based warfare of the Han legions. It was faster, fluid, built around the strengths of light cavalry, lightning raids, ambushes in treacherous terrain, striking and vanishing before a heavier force could react. They knew the mountains and deserts intimately, terrain where heavily armored Han infantry, bogged down by supply wagons, struggled and starved. Their tribal structure allowed rapid mobilization around charismatic chieftains, though sometimes hindered long-term unity. Their relationship with Chinese empires wasn't always war. For centuries, periods of peace existed. Trade flowed, Qiang horses for Han silk and grain. Some Qiang tribes paid tribute, acknowledging the emperor's symbolic authority. Many Qiang warriors even served bravely within the Han army as skilled auxiliaries, fighting the empire's enemies like the Xiongnu. But the fundamental conflict remained. The Han Empire kept expanding westward, relentlessly pushing its borders, forts, and settlers deeper into lands that Qiang considered their own. Each new Han commandery meant less grazing land. Each new decree from Luoyang meant more interference. From the Qiang perspective, this wasn't rebellion. It was resistance against cultural annihilation, a desperate fight for their homes and identity against an empire seemingly determined to swallow them whole or wipe them out. The simmering anger stoked by decades of grievances finally boiled over around 184 AD. Historians now call this the Liang Province Rebellion, a war that nearly severed China's western arm. It wasn't just one incident, but a perfect storm. Drought and famine pushed struggling communities to the edge. Corrupt officials demanded more taxes from starving people. Ambitious leaders arose among both Qiang and disgruntled Han elements, seeing an opportunity. The Han Empire was already reeling, battling the massive Yellow Turban Rebellion in the east. Its armies were stretched thin, its treasury depleted. If ever there was a time to strike back, it was now. Alliances formed in secret between powerful Qiang chieftains and Han Chinese strongmen on the frontier, men like Beigong Boiwu and Li Wenhao, who felt just as ignored and exploited by the distant capital. The spark had found the powder keg. The frontier exploded.
The explosion, when it came, was devastating. Like a dam bursting, the pent-up fury surged across Liang Province. Qiang horsemen, swift and terrifying, descended from the mountains, joined by Han rebels directing attacks against the empire's weakest points. Garrisons, isolated and undermanned, were overrun. Towns, centers of Han administration, were sacked and burned, officials executed, granaries looted. The network of Han control collapsed almost overnight. Panic gripped the region. Han settlers fled eastward, refugees carrying tales of horror. The vital Silk Road trade routes were severed, cutting off a major artery of wealth. What began as uprisings coalesced into full-scale war, threatening to tear the western territories away. In Luoyang, initial reports were likely filtered and downplayed by the eunuch-dominated court. But as dispatch after desperate dispatch arrived, detailing falling cities, annihilated legions, the gravity became undeniable. The Han war machine, already strained by the Yellow Turbans, lumbered into action. Experienced generals like Gang Bi were dispatched west with tens of thousands of soldiers. Orders were simple: crush the uprising, restore order, make an example. But the frontier was a general's nightmare. Vast distances, unforgiving terrain, jagged mountains, arid deserts. Supply lines stretched for hundreds of miles, vulnerable lifelines snaking through hostile territory where every shadow could hide an ambush. Qiang raiders targeted these lines relentlessly, capturing needed grain and weapons, leaving Han armies stranded. Han legions, mostly heavy infantry trained for open plains, struggled against Qiang fluidity. Burdened by armor and supply wagons, they were slow. Qiang cavalry, light and familiar with the land, refused pitched battles. They employed guerrilla warfare, lightning raids, feigned retreats into ambushes, harassment of foraging parties, poisoning water sources, scorched earth tactics that left Han armies starving. Disease swept Han camps, fueled by poor sanitation and malnutrition. Supplies dwindled, stolen by corrupt quartermasters or captured by rebels. Soldiers, many conscripts from distant provinces, grew demoralized by endless marching, constant fear, hunger, disease, watching comrades die far from home. Victories were often hollow, costing too many lives. A rebel force scattered, a town retaken, but the resistance remained elusive, melting into the mountains only to reappear elsewhere. Frustrated Han commanders often resorted to appalling brutality. Captured rebels were tortured, dismembered, heads displayed on pikes. Villages merely suspected of sympathizing were wiped out, men, women, children slaughtered. These tactics brought temporary, fearful quiet, but sowed undying hatred, ensuring the conflict continued for generations. Back in Luoyang, the war became a political pawn. Factions blamed each other. Eunuchs interfered in military appointments, promoting incompetent favorites, undermining capable generals. Orders from the capital, based on outdated intelligence and political maneuvering, often contradicted reality, leading to disastrous decisions. The cost was staggering, bleeding the dynasty white. Year after year, vast sums of money and grain poured into the Western campaigns. Tens of thousands of soldiers marched west, many never returning. The constant warfare drained the Han treasury, crippling its ability to handle other crises and fueling the very corruption that caused the rebellion. This wasn't just a war, it was a quagmire, a slow, grinding disaster exposing Han weakness and fatal flaws. Year after year, the empire bled. The frontier devoured everything the Han sent: soldiers, gold, and hope.
Faced with years of failure, the potential loss of the Northwest, and a cripplingly empty treasury, the desperate Han court under Emperor Ling decided on one last major effort. Around 185 AD, senior minister Zhang Wen was appointed general of chariots and cavalry, commanding a huge force of over 100,000 men, a massive concentration of power. This was meant to be the final blow. Several notable figures served under him, including Sun Jian, the famous Tiger of Jiangdong, and a certain ambitious cavalry commander from Liang Province, Zhuo. Yet the campaign quickly bogged down. Zhang Wen, though respected, was cautious, perhaps overwhelmed by the challenge. The massive army struggled with logistics across the vast, hostile territory. Rebel forces, increasingly organized under leaders like Han Sui and Ma Teng, rising warlords amidst the chaos, used cunning guerrilla tactics, avoiding decisive battles while relentlessly harassing vulnerable supply lines, bleeding the imperial army. Friction simmered within the Han command. The aggressive Sun Jian reportedly clashed with the conservative Zhang Wen over strategy. And then there was Dong Zhuo. As a man of the frontier, commanding troops from the frontier, he understood the enemy and terrain in ways capital generals could not. While Zhang Wen hesitated, Dong Zhuo acted decisively, sometimes brutally. Historical accounts suggest localized successes through aggressive cavalry maneuvers or ruthless pacification. The famous story, perhaps legend, of him damming a river to escape pursuit and trap enemies captures his cunning reputation. He operated with autonomy, relying on his Liang Province soldiers who trusted him implicitly, loyal primarily to him, not the distant emperor. During a key phase near Meiliang, Zhang Wen's main army reportedly stalled, facing starvation. Dong Zhuo, in his sector, was apparently more successful, perhaps through better foraging or ruthless seizure of resources. He kept his troops fed and combat effective, solidifying their fierce personal loyalty. He kept them alive while others failed. When Zhang Wen eventually ordered a general retreat, Dong Zhuo's contingent was said to be the only major formation returning in good order, having protected its supplies and possibly secured tactical gains. Officially, back in Luoyang, the campaign was spun as a success. Rebellion pushed back, some leaders killed or surrendered. Zhang Wen and successful subordinates, including Dong Zhuo, were rewarded. But the victory was illusory. The core rebel strength under Han Sui and Ma Teng remained. The cost in lives and treasure was enormous. The brutality employed likely created more long-term enemies. More importantly, the campaign elevated Dong Zhuo. He returned not just as a victorious general, but as a commander whose reputation for effectiveness, especially among crucial frontier troops, was undeniable. He had proven capable while court-appointed leadership faltered, yet whispers followed him, insubordination, enriching himself by looting, unnecessary cruelty. The qualities making him effective on the frontier marked him as dangerous within the decaying Han system. The empire thought it won a battle, but inadvertently strengthened the man who would help destroy it.
Luoyang celebrated, or the court did. Jiang Wen received honors. Dong Zhuo was promoted to General of the Van, granted greater authority. Official histories recorded the suppression of the Liang Province Rebellion. Monuments were planned, victory odes written praising imperial wisdom. But hundreds of miles away on the frontier, there was no celebration, only the taste of ash and the silence of devastation. Liang Province was shattered. Years of relentless warfare destroyed farmland, ruined vital irrigation systems, emptied towns. Commerce along the Silk Road, once immensely wealthy, was crippled by insecurity and banditry. Banditry was rampant as demobilized soldiers and desperate peasants turned to crime. Famine stalked the land, consequence of burned fields and disrupted harvests. The Han victory was written in ash and bone, paid for by the suffering of millions, Han and Qiang alike. The frontier wasn't pacified, it was exhausted. The Qiang tribes, though pushed back, were not broken. Their core strength remained in the mountains, their resentment simmered, ready to flare up again. Han rebels who joined them, like Han Su and Ma Teng, emerged transformed. They tested themselves against the empire and survived. They now commanded territories and armies of Han veterans and Qiang warriors, becoming powerful, semi-independent warlords. Han imperial authority in the northwest became almost non-existent beyond a few garrisoned cities. The frontier remained a bleeding wound, a source of instability. The financial cost was catastrophic for the Han treasury. Years of pouring money, grain, and equipment into the northwestern campaigns left the central government bankrupt. This crippled its ability to respond to other crises, pay officials and soldiers consistently, fueling corruption, and maintain essential infrastructure. The Han victory wasn't just a military defeat disguised as victory. It was a major factor in the systemic collapse of Han finances and administration, accelerating the dynasty's slide towards oblivion. And the most dangerous consequence? Dong Zhuo. He returned a hero to some, undeniably effective. More importantly, he returned as undisputed master of the Liang Province army. These weren't just imperial soldiers, they were his soldiers, veterans hardened by brutal warfare, fiercely loyal not to the Han dynasty, but to the commander who led them through hell, kept them fed, shared hardships, rewarded service with spoils. They were outsiders like him, frontiersmen with little respect for the decadent court. Dong Zhuo had immense personal wealth, likely looted during campaigns. He held high official titles. Crucially, he commanded an independent military force unmatched in combat experience and personal loyalty. He was the unintended harvest of the empire's long struggle, a weapon forged in rebellion's fires, now honed, powerful, waiting to strike at the empire's vulnerable heart.
The Han-Qiang Wars did more than give Dong Zhuo an army. They stripped away any illusions about the empire and forged his soul in brutal pragmatism. He spent years watching incompetent, court-appointed generals lead soldiers to disaster. He saw eunuchs in Luoyang undermine campaigns for political gain. He witnessed the gap between capital pronouncements, Confucian ideals of virtue, loyalty, and the bloody reality of borderland survival. Any respect for the central government, the son of heaven, Han hierarchies, likely evaporated in the dust and heat of those campaigns. What replaced it was a simple, ruthless calculus learned where survival was the only virtue, strength the only currency. Power flowed not from imperial decrees, but from the loyalty of men who would kill and die for you. He learned how to cultivate that loyalty through shared danger, promises of wealth, often looted, and his charismatic, intimidating presence. He was one of them, a man of the frontier. His men knew he understood their world. He also learned, chillingly, that fear was a more reliable, efficient tool than love or respect. A terrified populace obeyed. A terrified soldier followed orders. He saw the Qiang fight, their speed, ferocity, endurance, and likely incorporated their ruthless effectiveness into his methods, blending Han discipline with frontier savagery. He learned deep down, rules were luxuries for the weak. The strong made their own rules, took what they wanted. His army reflected this brutal education. Not just Han soldiers, he integrated Qiang auxiliaries, mercenaries, anyone who could fight and was loyal personally to Dong Zhuo. A diverse, hardened force, bound not by abstract loyalty to the Han, an entity most likely viewed with indifference or hostility, but by Dong Zhuo's leadership and promise of spoils. After the Liang campaigns officially ended, he didn't disband this force. He kept it close, stationed in the northwest, a private kingdom within the empire. He used official titles and wealth to strengthen it, ensuring his men were well-equipped, well-fed, often at local expense, and absolutely loyal to him above all. He was transforming, shedding the skin of a Han general, revealing the nascent form of an independent warlord, biding his time. Perhaps he started as just another ambitious officer climbing ranks, but long, brutalizing years on the frontier, constant violence, corruption witnessed at highest levels, immense personal power accumulated. It transformed him irrevocably. He saw an empire decaying, hollowed out by elites, blind to dangers gathering. He saw a throne occupied by weaklings, manipulated by schemers understanding nothing of real power. And he possessed the only thing that now mattered: raw, disciplined military force. The Han-Qiang Wars were his brutal education. He graduated with honors in violence and pragmatism. In crushing Qiang Rebellion for the empire, Dong Zhuo learned the terrible lesson that would one day destroy the empire. An empire is only worth what its strongest sword dictates, and he now held the sharpest sword.
The Great Liang Province Rebellion officially ended, or so Luoyang claimed. The court declared victory, bestowed titles, tried to forget. But the peace was fragile, exhausted, a bandage on a festering wound. The Northwest remained scarred, impoverished, unstable. Han Sui and Ma Tang ruled their territories like kings, paying only lip service to the distant emperor. Their power, built on local loyalties and hardened armies, constantly reminded of Han's diminished authority. New, smaller uprisings flickered like embers. The Han Dynasty poured countless lives and treasures into holding its western frontier, achieving little more than a costly stalemate, leaving bitterness and a region ripe for more conflict. The frontier wasn't pacified. It merely wore the mask of submission while sharpening its knives. Back in Luoyang, far removed, the court quickly forgot, or chose to. The eunuchs, surviving He Jin's clumsy purge attempt, consolidated power further, tightening their parasitic grip. Corruption deepened. Selling offices continued unabated. Political infighting grew more vicious, detached from urgent problems. The immense financial cost of frontier campaigns was swept under the rug, systemic weaknesses unaddressed. The empire stumbled onward like a drunken man, blind to the abyss, concerned only with petty palace squabbles. And out west, in relative quiet, Dong Zhuo waited. He held official posts, governor, commander. He commanded his loyal army, keeping it disciplined, equipped, battle-ready. And he watched. He watched the slow-motion collapse of the dynasty he swore to protect. He saw the weakness, division, rot spreading from the capital. He was no longer just a frontier general bound by duty. He was the embodiment of the empire's failures, a concentration of the violence and autonomy Han inadvertently nurtured, trying to control the uncontrollable frontier. He was the consequence made flesh. He was the reckoning. The Han-Qiang Wars faded from court attention, dismissed as a costly but concluded chapter. But the conflict had irrevocably weakened the empire, draining coffers, exposing impotence. Crucially, it forged a weapon in its fires: Dong Zhuo and his Liang Province army. The frontier, neglected, misunderstood, blood-soaked, produced the man embodying its ruthless spirit. The Han Dynasty had sown the wind in the west for a century, ignoring the growing storm. Soon, Dong Zhuo would ride east, and he would unleash the whirlwind on the unsuspecting heart of the empire.
To see what happens when the wolf arrives at the capital, check out our video on Dong Zhuo, the ruthless tyrant who started the Three Kingdoms War, right here on the channel. You'll find the link on screen now.